So a friend recently said there are two ways to become a good developer. Number one, either you're God gifted, or number two, you practice a lot and are getting better every day. There's no third way to become a good programmer. And I agree. But the question is, how do you practice every day if you don't lie in the first category? The answer is you're just going to pick difficult problems every day and try to solve them, get better. And that's exactly what we're doing today. Today, we'll try to solve some real world issues in a bunch of open source organizations, but we'll solve them the right way. Today, it's become sort of easy to look at code bases, understand them, and contribute to issues thanks to AI. There's always a right way and a wrong way. There are a bunch of things that AI can't do. So the practice that we're going to follow today is going to look as follows. What we're going to do is we're going to pick one organization amongst the 5 that are listed over here. These are just my best picks right now. If I wanted to contribute to an org based on my interests, I think these 5 are fairly, aligned to my interests and are also being used in the real world. Maybe not number 3. It's a little more archaic or old of an org. Everything else is usually or mostly a business or a library. That's one of the orgs that we'll pick today. The things to do more technically are going to be, we'll set up the project locally, we will pick an issue, we will solve the issue, but we will not PR it directly. We'll make sure our final pull request is very polished. And for that, we're first going to fork the organization and we'll create a PR on the fork. We'll use an AI tool called 𝗟𝗶H to review the PR. We'll make sure whatever it is asking us to fix as follow-ups, we fix them before we PR to the final issue. Finally, we'll PR and we'll hope for the best for it to get merged. But there are a few callouts always in such videos. Number one, do not spam any of the organizations. Over time, this has gotten better. I think people are smart enough to not spam orgs today. Don't pick any of the issues that we're picking today because there's a high probability a lot of people will be doing that. Other than that, a more practical call out might be, this is an issue that one of the students at 𝗟𝗶H solved right after our last live stream. In our last live stream also, we were contributing to an open source project. And while his issue got merged and the change was fairly simple, it's just one line of code in the end. A great thing is that it got merged. The bad thing is he didn't follow up really well on what the maintainers were asking. As soon as he created the PR, the first thing that was asked to do was write tests for it, which he didn't, and then the maintainer had to write tests themselves. So one thing I'd urge you to do is make sure the PR is polished enough that the life of the maintainer becomes easy. In the end, the maintainer, if they have to add the tests, it's one line of code that you've changed, but much more lines of code that they had to add themselves, and they had to context switch to the issue and solve it. So we'll try our best to vet the pull request locally using 𝗟𝗶H, and only if we feel everything is good to go will we finally PR the issue on the main repository. Hopefully that's enough context. With that, step 1 is going to be picking the organization for the day. So as I said, I've listed them down based on my interest. N8N I'm interested in because it's mildly close to AI right now. It's a decent library if you want to learn about applied AI and agents. The same is sort of true for LangChain. It's a little more in depth. It's still used for agents. It's still applied AI, but it's the underlying library and not an application built on top of it, which is slightly easier. 𝗟𝗶 is just a good business right now. Full stack application, probably the most modern stack that most startups would use, which is Next.js for everything. Processing mostly for not a personal interest generally, but this is a very common org in GSOC and something that I would like the students at Hendex School to contribute to, and hence I've added this here. And Anchor, because this is one of the core Solana libraries that I might be able to contribute to. I think most Solana libraries are slightly hard to digest in terms of what they do, not enough documentation, some really deep tech stuff, versus Anchor is one that I mildly understand right now, which is why these are the 5 picks for the day. Generally, when I'm picking an org, it would depend really on your motivations. If it's learning, then I would have probably gone with either Anchor or LangChain. If it is getting a job or, getting an immediate job, by which I mean, most companies, unfortunately, are not deep tech companies. Most companies are businesses around that use deep tech technologies like these two to, build businesses like these two. So if your goal is to get, a job right now, you probably want to pick 1 or 2. If it is, just general interest or a research job or a more deep tech job, then it's probably 4 and 5. I'd probably just go with N8N because it's one I've already set up locally in the past. And for everyone, this is very easy to set up. The other pick, if I did have, would probably be LangChain only. Again, I think I'm a little biased towards AI because this is the next thing that's coming up in Super 30, or probably the next thing that's coming up in general. So these are the two that I would like to pick. In terms of activity, I think both are fairly active. NA10 specifically has like at least 7-8 issues that are opened every day. So that's why I like this. And LangChain specifically is just a library a little more deeper or harder to understand. I would assume I picked the wrong org, though I probably want to contribute to LangChain JS. I don't think I have enough expertise to contribute to LangChain in Python right now. So these are the two picks for me right now, and it's probably just going to be a coin flip amongst them because this needs to be a shorter video. I don't want to spend too much time picking one. So let's just do a coin flip and figure out, is it going to be 1 or 2? So let's go to chat.openai.com and ask it, pick a random number from 1 and 2. If it picks 1, we'll go with LangChain. If it picks 2, we'll go with NA10. It did pick 2, so NA10 it is. Let's start to look at some issues in NA10. I understand the product. I'll still try to maybe take you through the product really quickly. So let's do that first. Let's look at what exactly is NA10. Why do you use it, and where is it related to AI right now? Let's get into that next. Right, so let's get into what exactly is N8, and it's a fairly famous application these days. It's very close to what Zapier does. It lets you create workflows. What is a workflow? If I click on the create workflow button over here, it's basically a UI builder for async tasks one after the other. This might be a more complicated statement than it needs to be. I think I can just show what it does fairly quickly. You can attach a trigger over here, and there can be many triggers. For example, the most common trigger you probably want to do or add is a webhook trigger. This basically means it gives you a URL. In this case, the URL it gave me is kirat123.app.anyten.cloud/webhook/NID. It gives you such a URL that you can put in your other services. For example, I might put this URL in Razorpay. For Razorpay to hit this URL, whenever a new payment comes, whenever someone pays me. So whenever someone pays me, Razorpay will hit this webhook. Which webhook? This webhook right here. Webhook is nothing but a URL, basically a backend URL. Whenever Razorpay hits this URL, this workflow will start, which basically means whatever steps I write after this. For example, I might want to send the user an email, something like, hey, thank you for signing up for my project or my platform. So this workflow would let me, whenever someone has paid for my product, would let me send them an email automatically. So if I select send an email, I need to give it some credentials for my email, which basically means, either an SMTP credential or my Gmail account access, so that it can actually send them an email using my Gmail. So you can click on create new credentials. And here is where you have to put right now SMTP credentials. I don't know how many of you understand what SMTP is, but it's basically SMTP stands for Simple Mail TP, Transport Protocol, I think. But basically it's a server that you have to start to actually send people email. You don't usually start it yourself. You rely on other services like Resend or Mailgun that provide you SMTP credentials. So you take your mailing credentials from there, you put them over here, and after that you can actually send that specific user an email that looks something like this. This is a new action in my workflow. I might want to also send them a WhatsApp message or a Telegram message. So I can select Telegram, select send a message over here, and put my Telegram account credentials, which I already have over here. Again, select the chat ID where I want to send the message, write some text, so on and so forth. You might have good questions at this point, 𝗟𝗶H. How do I know the chat ID? Or how do I know what email to send the answer to or the email to? That's a very good question. It shouldn't be a hard-coded email over here. It should be some email that Razorpay provides you. When someone pays you on your Razorpay page or through some front end of yours, whenever the webhook is hit, it will be hit with the amount that they've paid and the payment transaction ID and the email of the user. So you can pick the email from here and get it as an input over here, and then drag the user's email over here so that drag the user's email over here so that whoever paid is the person who actually gets the email. And similarly for Telegram, for WhatsApp, you can take their phone number from the webhook and put that and send them a WhatsApp message. Hey, thank you for signing up to my product. So this is what NA10 lets you do. It has much more complicated nodes. Specifically, there's an AI agent node that's fairly popular right now that basically lets you talk to an LLM, give it access to some memory, some tool calls. You can select what chat model do you want to use. Do you want to use Claude, OpenAI, so on and so forth. So you can create like a fairly complicated workflow over here. Whenever a user of yours pays on a page, this webhook gets hit and all of these nodes start to trigger one after the other. That is what NA10 lets you do. As I said, it's very close to Zapier. Zapier lets you do something similar. And, there are many orgs that use this. And as developers, we don't really look at no code tools like these. We don't want to code everything, but this is like a fairly popular tool in, non-dev people slash marketeers, things like these. That is what the product does. It is an open source product, which basically means all of its code exists over here. So if you go to na10io/na10, you'll find the full code base for this specific website. The next step usually is setting up the project locally and looking at some issues. So I guess we'll kick things off with, you already saw the product on cloud. What does it look like on na10.cloud? Let's try to set up na10 locally. Let's see if it works or not. Once we've been able to set it up locally, we'll try to look at some issues and try to solve them. All right, setting up the project locally is always a challenge. It really depends on how well the code base is maintained and how easy the contribution guidelines or local setup is. For na10, it's fairly straightforward. If you've ever used Node.js or have worked on a Munstack project in the past, it's like a fairly easy project to contribute to. Generally, the way to go is to find the contribution guidelines or the setup process. Let's see if we can find something like this. There is a contributing.md, which will probably contain how can you contribute to na10. And somewhere here, there is the developer setup, which is what we want to go through. We want to understand how can we set up the project locally. If you want to change or extend na10, you will have to make sure that all the needed dependencies are installed and the packages get linked correctly. Here's a short guide on how to do it. If you already have VS Code and Docker installed, which I do, you can go through this process. That is if you probably want to start using Docker. I don't want to start using Docker. I just want to run it natively. Generally, starting using Docker is a good idea, but for this specific project, it's a very simple project to set up, which is why we're not going with approach number 1. We're going with approach number 2, which is to set it up locally properly without starting it in a container. I do have Node.js. I do have pnpm. I will install core-pack as I install all the dependencies. I am on a Mac. No additional packages are required. So all I have to do is, number 1, I should probably fork the repository. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that on a different GitHub though. I have 2 GitHubs and this is the second one. I'm going to fork na10.io in this other GitHub of mine that is on Brave browser. How do you fork a repository? You open the repository, you click on the fork button, and you click on create fork. What this does is it'll basically clone the project to my GitHub username. So if you go to github.com/𝗟𝗶Ｈ𝗸𝘀, which is my other alt account, for those of you who don't know, it's my other GitHub, github.com/𝗟𝗶H𝗸𝘀, which now has an na10 repository, which is a fork from na10io/na10. Why have I created this fork? Because we're first going to PR over here and we're going to use CodeRabbit to vet the PR and make sure it works as expected. Moving on, after you have created the fork, what is the next step? It is to clone the repository. So let me clone this repository. That is my fork. I'm not going to clone the main repository. I'm going to clone the fork. It doesn't really change much, but if that's what the setup procedure says, that's what we're going to do. So let me create a new folder called OS contributions. Let me just clone the repository directly over here. So that's github.com/𝗟𝗶H𝗀𝘀/na10. Notice the username is 𝗟𝗶H𝗀𝘀 because I'm cloning my fork. I am not cloning from the main na10io organization. While this is happening, let's read the next steps. The next steps say go into the na10 folder, add the original na10 repository as upstream. We don't need this step right now. Do a pnpm install, do a pnpm build, followed by a pnpm start. It's as simple as that. That's why I said it's like a fairly simple project to set up. We still don't know if it will work in the first grow, but 99% it will, because we did a live stream last week where we were trying to do the same thing. And it was as simple as just doing an install followed by a start. So let's wait for it to clone and then we'll follow steps. We follow these steps. We'll do a pnpm install, pnpm build, and pnpm start. That's done. So let's go into the na10 repo. Let's do a pnpm install Right, that's done, followed by a pnpm run build. Right, that's done. Lastly, pnpm run start to start the project locally, and hopefully that does the trick. Let's open localhost colon 5678. Let me set things up really quickly. And I just hope, oh, it just works without an email, which is great. Skip for now. I'll be able to set it up. That's why I said the setup process is really simple. You just run npm run install, build and start, and it works. Let me try to quickly create a workflow, new node, the same thing that we did on the cloud version, a webhook. I'm not adding any details in there, followed by, let's say, a Telegram message, and it just works, which is great. Of course, we haven't seen this in action, but we'll see what all things we need working based on what issue we're solving. Right now, the project setup is done. That means we're done with step number 3. Step number 4 is going to be actually finding an issue and making sure it's solvable in the next 1 hour, which is my current timeline for this. So let's go ahead, look at the issues table, and try to find an issue that we can solve in the next 1 hour. All right, let's look at some of the recent issues and try to solve one of these. This probably take some time, so it's just a bunch of exploration and trying to see if there's something that's manageable in an hour to fix. All right, let's start off with this one. It seems like an easy one. Double quotes breaks the syntax highlighting of Microsoft SQL. When a Microsoft SQL node containing a double quote character is put in the query, syntax highlighting is broken. Yeah, it looks pretty broken. It's more visible when trying to replace some characters. See this. Yeah, it's probably a decent issue. It would be a front-end issue. They probably use something like ACE or code mirror over here for syntax highlighting. So it'll probably be a downstream issue in that library, or we'll have to configure the library somehow. So not a super interesting issue, not a very important issue also, because it still works. It's just that the front end has syntax highlighting open. I'll still keep it open. Seems like a decent issue. If I had done Salesforce before, I probably would have picked this up. HTTP request unable to pass multiple values for the same query parameter. Ooh, that's a good one. I have an HTTP request that I need to pass as an array of query parameters like this. Question mark, organization work tags array equal to this thing, and organization work array equal to this thing. That's a fairly common way to pass an array of elements through a query parameter. What is a query parameter? Anything in the URL that looks like this. Username equal to 𝗟𝗶ৃh and username equal to Raman. That should translate to a username array on the backend whenever this is received. That looks something like this. So fairly common thing that most backends support. If you pass the same parameter twice, it gets received as an array. But for this guy, when I fill out the query parameter form like this, now the question really is, what's a query parameter form? We'll have to look into that. Alas, that doesn't work, and only last value is getting transmitted. Sort of makes sense. For more background, there's a community question. Question really is, where does this happen? Okay, this is probably, they've also pointed out where the issue might be, which is right here. HTTP request. So this is like if you want to send an HTTP request via anytime. So let's look at the flow that we had. It probably has a trigger for making an HTTP request, which is this trigger right here. And here there's a flag called send query parameters, where if I try to send 2 of them, so username 𝗟𝗶ৃh and another one called username and then 𝗟𝗶ૃh, it only sends the last one, this one right here. It doesn't forward the other one. How can I confirm this is a beautiful question. I can go to http://dump.io, http://dump.app. I can create a quick http dump over here. Let me copy this. Let me paste this as the URL here. I have username passed in twice, 𝗟𝗶ৃh and Raman. I should receive both of them. But if I click on execute step, it asks me to fix all the issues. So I'm going to fix an issue here. There's still seems to be an issue, but I don't know. Let's see. It's execute step. Okay, it is executing. And hopefully we received a request here. We did not. Execute. Oh, it's still executing. My bad. Let's look at the logs and see if something is up. I don't see anything in the logs. The step did not execute. Waiting for a trigger node to execute. Close this window to go back to the canvas. That is fine, but it's still not executing the step. Let me refresh. Let me try it one more time. Oh, something is up. Let me delete. Go back here. Send an HTTP request, a GET request here with two query parameters, both of them being username. When I click on execute step, it doesn't seem to execute, but that's fine. It's probably something with my local setup. I'm assuming what happens is only username, the final request that will go will look something like this. It will be this URL $username equal to Raman. That means it will only send the second query parameter. It will not send the first query parameter. What is expected is something like this: $username equal to 𝗟𝗶H and username equal to Raman. We want to send both the query parameters to this backend or this HTTP server, but it's only sending the last one. Actually, I can probably confirm this on the cloud version because I think my local setup has something weird. I think if I try to do the same thing on the cloud version, it will just work. So let me copy this. Let me go here. Let me create a new workflow. Let me add a random first step, which could be a manual trigger followed by HTTP request. Paste the URL, flip on the query parameters, username 𝗟𝗶H, username Raman. I expect both of these to reach the HTTP dump, and it says invalid URL. Oh, there's an extra space here. Let me remove that. Execute step, and now node executed successfully. If I go here, I see a request, and notice only $username equal to Raman comes. It should get $username equal to 𝗟𝗶H and username equal to Raman. It should receive both of them. It's only receiving one of them. I sent both the query parameters. Their name is the same. Now this is where things get tricky. Should the second one override the first one? The answer is probably not. If the user has created a workflow which has both, like two query parameters that have the same key, both of them should be forwarded to the final HTTP request that is being made. So fairly valid issue. I don't know if someone has already commented on it, if it's a valid issue or not, if they want it fixed or not. Thank you for reaching out. If you have received the issue, looking into it, we'll keep you updated. There's nothing here that says this should be done or this should not be done. Logically, it seems like it's a good thing to do. And thankfully, someone has also pointed us to where, oh, my bad, pointed us to where the fix might be. So there is, most of their nodes exist in this nodes base/nodes folder, like other than the AI nodes and some complicated nodes. Every other node, be it a send email node, a telegram node, an Airtable node, exists. The logic for them exists over here. The one that we're looking at right now is HTTP request version 3. So this is where, we're going to find the fix. We could have reached the file, ourselves as well, but thankfully someone has not just pointed out the file, but also, where did it go? But has also pointed out this specific line of code where the issue might be, and this looks perfect. Accumulator _name equal to _value. So what this is doing is the accumulator, which is probably an object that's passed in value. We'll try to solve it. You guys understand the issue? I mean, let's dive into the code base together slowly in a more structured fashion. Do we understand the issue? Is the issue digestible? The issue says, let me open it again, which is a fairly recent issue. It was posted around 3 hours ago. The issue says if you pass in two query parameters with the same name, it only forwards the last query parameter, which is bad. What we want is both of them should be forwarded. That basically translates to this key equal to financial and the same key equal to investment. Both of these query parameters should be passed in the HTTP request. That seems like a decent issue to solve. It also touches the nodes ka logic, which is primarily where you'll be working, because the whole goal of n8n is to add more and more types of nodes and smaller issues in those nodes. There are a bunch of other interesting parts, but this is probably one of the most core part where a lot of coding happens. As you saw, HTTP request had a version 2, version 3, version 1. So you probably want to spend a lot of time here and understand how these work. That's what we're going to do. We'll understand how does the HTTP request node work. Why does it not pass both the query parameters or multiple query parameters, and how can we fix it? With that, let's get into the next section, solving the issue. All right, I've opened the code base locally. If you remember, there was a file called nodesbase/nodes/v3/http request/v3 Yeah, that's the one. This is the folder, which is packages slash nodes base slash nodes slash http request slash v3 slash this folder basically contains all the logic for doing our final thing, which is sending an http request through a node. Let's try to read through it. There is a description.ts, which I'm assuming is an extra metadata file. Yeah, it just has the name of the action, an ID for the action. Is it a call out or something else? I don't know what a call out is actually here. But it basically describes a bunch of properties for the nodes. And then it describes something called main properties, which probably is, what all can you, or it lets you import a curl over here, it seems. What all methods does it support? So delete, get, head, options, patch, post, put. These are probably what appear over here. So list of these methods by default get, and you can select other ones. Then there is the URL, which is what appears over here. Then there is authentication, that is what appears over here. Then come, with something called credential type, which I don't see here. Probably if I flip one of these on, I'll see them. I'm trying to reach, yeah, these are all related to, I would assume, authentication. SSL certificates, query parameters, there we go. Send query parameters is, what do you call it? A flip or a switch, basically, something like this. Question really is when you flip it on, what happens from there, and where is all of that described? There you go. Specify query parameters. Use fields below is one thing, use JSON is another thing. In our case, we've selected used field below. Doesn't really matter in both the cases. You can represent the same thing as a JSON object, you can represent the same thing as using fields. And then the actual query parameters, a button called, so their whole UI is very declarative. Like it's basically built from this very big JSON. This very big JSON represents the final UI. We don't have to change anything here. I'm just trying to explore the front end. Eventually the change will exist in the back end for sure. We're just trying to see how is this model created. And it seems like this very big model is actually created using this JSON object. This JSON object is eventually sort of opened up in the front end, and this UI is generated using this JSON object. There's no real React component that has been written. This JSON is what translates to this front end, which is not what we're worried about right now. We're worried about the back end. Probably HTTP request v3.node.ts has the logic to actually, that actually runs the thing, that actually runs when you click on execute step. That's what where we want to reach. So if I scroll, there is a function called execute. The name is giving it away. Most probably when I click on execute step, I think it's a fair assumption to make the execute method is what gets called. And here again, there's a bunch of things that we'll probably get comfortable with over time. Like if I read this, if I work on 5-6 nodes, is when I'll become fairly comfortable with, I don't know, functions like get node parameter, which I can guess right now, get node parameter authentication probably means whether or not the user has, flipped this on, so on and so forth. So let's see what they're trying to do. They have a bunch of variables defined. They have described this thing called request options, which probably is the final object which needs to have our query string or query parameters. So I'm assuming this is what eventually gets filled with the wrong things, and we need to fill this with the right things. Scroll down a little bit more. Pagination, request, authentication logic, I would assume, which we are not worried about. URL, request method. What I really need is, yeah, there you go. Send query parameters is this. Query parameters is get node parameters, query parameters or parameters. This is where the magic would happen. Let's see where this is used. If the person has flipped on send query and they have specified some query parameters, is when we say request options.qs, which is the thing that we saw over here, query string is equal to reduce async query parameters, comma this thing. This function is probably what does the magic. No, this is a normal generic function, just reduces all the query parameters. This might be where the issue is. I don't know why they selected something else. I'm assuming this is where the issue is. What does this do? Array.reduce. And what does the reducer do? There you go. Parameters, key to value. Perfect. Accumulator and current. Accumulator, unfortunately, is an object. This is where things get tricky. Name value is this thing, options is this thing. And yeah, this is where they said there's an issue, which is actually true. Yeah, this is where things get tricky. Question is, where is this function being used? And I hope it's not more than one places. I am wrong. It is being used in many places. That probably means we'll have to describe or create our own function that looks like this. Because reduce async is being used in a bunch of places, and a lot of those places might want to override values. We don't want to override values. We want whenever our, where is our function called? There you go. Whenever a query string is generated, it's a key value pair. Let's see, what is QS? IData. Oh, my bad. What is QS? IData object. String, generic value IData object, generic value array IData object, array. So yeah, that's the solution right there. Our type needs to be, it just can be an array for all the query strings, or it can be generic value for one, an array for another one. But this is the function that we need to sort of probably not change because it's being used in a few places. I might just add another one. Let's start there. Let's start by defining a new function called parameters to key value. What's a good word for this? Insert a reel over here that I saw today that developers are really bad at naming variables. Parameters to key value. Don't skip duplicates. That's a bad variable name. This is where I'll spend most of my time. Parameters to key value. Accumulate. Oh, bad word, but we'll go with it for now. If you want to solve this, you probably need to understand what reduce does in JavaScript. If you don't understand that, then this will be a little tricky. But basically pause the video, understand what a dot reduce function does, which is where we're passing this again and again. So if you look at reduce async, we're passing this as a second parameter. Same thing over here. So what does reduce do? Reduce async is probably just a wrapper on top of reduce. Yeah, which I totally understand what's being done here. Not that we don't need reduce async here. For us, reduce would just work, but the reduce async, that's what we're going to use as well. Where were we? Parameters to key value is what we don't want to use anymore. We want to use this for when we are generating the key pairs. The query string, which is this one right here. So when we're generating the query strings, we will not use parameters to key value. We will use parameters to key value accumulate, which we still have to write. We haven't yet written it. All right. A TLDR of what reduce does, it basically takes an array as an input, and it can reduce the array to anything else. Could be another array, could be another object, a bunch of things. It basically iterates over the array and lets you construct a final thing, a final answer. In our case, that final answer needs to look like, it used to look like this. Username 𝗟𝗶ৃh and something else. It now needs to look like this. Username 𝗟𝗶ৃh, Raman. Basically, the values now need to be arrays rather than just being a string. That is what needs to change now. So we can actually give this much better types. The accumulator can actually be key string to basically whatever the type was of a query string. QS equal to, oh, oopsie daisy. What's the type of QS here? It's IData object. Probably needs to be this. Yeah, it should be this, the accumulator, unless we want to keep it very generic, which let's say we don't. I just think it makes sense to have better types everywhere. So I just do this IData object, and current is the current thing, which will look the same. Current thing basically means as you go through the array of all the elements for the query strings, this is the key of the query string, username, this is the value of the query string, which is Raman. So that's what we're going to sort of replace over here. All right. The logic would be okay. Parameter form binary data. I don't think this will ever happen for a query string. I don't think a query string will ever even have a parameter type. I think body probably does. Form data, raw, init and binary file. Query parameters don't have a type, so we probably don't have to worry about this if check that they have, and a bunch of other if checks. What we really need is this. What we need is this, but a better version of it, something like this. Wait, why do I have two quotes? I don't need this quote. What we need is something that almost looks like this. Basically needs to first check if accumulator of cur.name exists. That basically means we've already received one such field, username 𝗟𝗶, and the second field now needs to be pushed into an array. So this needs to change with accumulator of cur.name equal to accumulator of cur.name. Oh, actually, it's a little more. If type of this is not array or something like that. And type of string. If you know this is a string, that means, or it can also be this, generic. No, generic value is probably just a string only. Yeah, this is good. If it is this, then it'll look something like cur.value. Else it'll look something like this, and you need to return the accumulator. That's probably the fix, right? Yeah, it's not very complicated. What the fix does is, as you are accumulating all the query parameters, don't just keep overriding cur.name, or the value that exists at cur.name. This cur.name is basically going to be username or something like that. So what we were doing before was these two lines of code were running, and they were just overriding accumulator of username equal to 𝗟𝗶, and then accumulator of username equal to Raman. The if check wasn't really running. That's my assumption, but most probably the assumption is true. These two lines were running when we were accumulating the object, the query string object, and that was just causing problems. So what we've done is, why were they causing problems? Because if the same key comes twice, you're probably just going to override, not probably, you're going to override the original one, and 𝗟𝗶 is going to get replaced by Raman. What is going to happen right now is, the first time it comes, the object will look something like this, username 𝗟𝗶, and then the second time it comes is, it'll hit the if check, and it'll convert it into username 𝗟𝗶, Raman, something like this, which is exactly what we want. We want this to get replaced with username 𝗟𝗶, Raman. That's what this will do, right? It'll override accumulator of cur.name to be accumulator of cur.name, the current value that needs to be added. Oh, that's not it. Yeah, that's not it. That's a little more complicated. My bad. Else if accumulator of cur.name. So if it already exists and it is a string, we need to do this. But if it already exists and it's not a string, that means it's an array. Is when we just have to push to the array. So something like this. Or is it append? So unfortunately, I've added this. There might be a cleaner way to fix this. But for now, we know it is an array if it's reached here, right? If it has reached here and it was a string, it reached here. If it has reached here, it's not a string, then an array is the only other possibility. So I sort of, told TypeScript it is 100% going to be an array if it reaches over here. But we should fix that. We can make this a little more cleaner when it comes to TypeScript. And then, if this is the first time the key is coming, then it should be cur.name equal to cur.value. That is it. That's all that's needed for the issue. Should we test this locally, or should we use 𝗟𝗶 to test it? I would test it locally really quickly, then I'll see if I've missed something, and can 𝗟𝗶 point it out correctly for me. So let's do that. The easiest way to test this might be finally that the URL is created. I'll just log the URL. So qs equal to this thing, and then oh, hold on. Yeah, that's fine. If you use JSON, then the user should just specify the right JSON. So we don't have to make any changes here. Keep going. Where is the final request sent? Let's see. They have pagination and everything as well. I guess we don't need everything. We can just console.log requests here and hope for the best. Let's log requests here. Let's see, is it returning the right thing or not? So let's rebuild the project and restart it. Unfortunately, that's what we have to do right now. That's what I do, Abhi, on this code base. Eventually, we should not rebuild every time. We should probably make hot reloading work using npm run dev. I've never tried it. I'm sure it just works. But right now, just go through the more tedious way of building the project again. and then starting the project again and hoping, the changes have reflected. So what I've done to recap is I have, wherever the query string is being set, which was right here, and if it is a normal, if it's been made using this UI, using fields below, then I'm running my logic. If it is done using JSON, I expect the user to give me the right JSON, which is, username, array of Raman, 𝗟𝗶. So if the user is specifying the query parameters using a JSON, this is what I expect them to do. If they're not doing it, if they're doing this, username 𝗟𝗶 and username Raman, I expect myself to convert this into that JSON, which has, an array as the value. That's what I'm doing. That's what hopefully the code change does. We're testing it right now. I'm just waiting for the project to rebuild. When it rebuilds, I'm going to restart it and test it out. npm run start. And now if I go back to my local build, which was on localhost colon 5678, and if I try to create a workflow with a manual trigger followed by an HTTP request that sends again a GET request, I'm going to send it to the same HTTP dump. It was not working locally, so there's no point of this. That's why I've logged it. Send query parameter true, username 𝗟𝗶, username Raman, and when we execute it, I'm just hoping the request has the right query string, which has both the things. So I've written, oh, it did work locally this time. Perfect. Did it though? It did. I received the second one. Also, I received this one, and notice this is the request that I received. Notice username is 𝗟𝗶, Raman. It has question mark, username equal to 𝗟𝗶 and username equal to Raman. It will have both the things. Let's try it for the user's input. So what input did the user give us in the issue? Where is the issue? Right here, not right here. He had a fairly complicated, yeah, there you go. This is what they had. So basically this is the key. Let's add that here. This is the value, which was financial, and then the same key, and then the value was investment. Let's try to execute this step now. Step it failed. Expect the node's input data to contain binary file, but none was found. Ooh, did I? Oh, my bad. I did this. No, sorry, where is the one that did work? This one. Let me just do it here. This is an old tab where I had done a bunch of things. Let me just close this tab. This is the tab that I just used and it worked. So again, investment was one of them, and then financial was one of them, and then this is what the key looked like. Going to paste it here, going to paste it here, and execute step. It did happen. Go to HTTP dump and look at this. Q organization keyword tags is an array of, ooh, that looks very complicated. So financial, comma, 1 colon investment. That looks very wrong. Financial investment. My question to the guy would be, why did he have an array written over here? Is this how you write query parameters if it's an array? I don't think that's true. But let's ask our good friend ChatGPT here. Is this how one should specify multiple query params? Let's see. This, or should they do not have this, array tag over here? I've done this only once in the past, and I've just, had they're both valid ways. Oh God, that's not great. This is common in PHP, common in Java.NET. The problem now is our guy's thing is not supported. When we pass something like this is when the final thing looks like this. It's not great. Let's see what's wrong. It's an array of array comma object. It's like very weird. Okay, let's go back to the code base and see what's happening here. I think at least over here, in the thing that we have changed. Let me just remove this log. Actually, I would like to look at the query as well. Something like this. Oh, query string is not logged, which is not great. Oh, yeah, that's the query string. Would have been nice if this was logged so we could see the thing. I'm going to do that. I'm going to just JSON dot stringify request dot map r dot qs. I want to see just the query string and what it looks like. R dot options dot qs. And let's see what's up here. Now comes the tedious process of rebuilding the project. Just hoping run dev would just do it like this and just have some level of hot reloading. I could of course be wrong, and it started on a different URL, so I don't rebuild and restart, guys. Back in a second after we rebuild and we restart. So I sort of solved the issue. The problem is it works for my use case, but our guy's use case is a little more tricky. Our guy's use case looks something like this, which is, the keys have an array over here. It's mostly fine, but yeah, it's causing an issue because the final, it also might be an issue with this guy parsing it, HTTP dump. Just 1 second. If I open HTTP dump again, look at the URL. Is this valid URL or not? Again, we're going to go to our good friend. It might just be an issue with this guy parsing it. So let me go here and copy this, paste it. Is this right? I don't know if it is. It looks overly indexed, it says, which I agree. Yeah, it becomes something like this. All key this thing, array of one included investment. It's not typical unless you're backend requires a nested array. It doesn't. It should be something like this. Exactly my point. So there's like a little more to this. Because our guy has, I think this might just all like separate to the original issue. This is another issue. If you have a query parameter that looks like this, things become weird. This will lead to us solving this downstream. Ekdam se fix nahi hoga. We'll probably have to touch a bunch of other logic to actually fix it. Let's quickly look at what it logs and we'll go from there. pnpm run start. Let's go back here. Let's open, what was it? It is 57868, whatever. This one right here. And let me just refresh this one only. Reload, followed by HTTP request, and hopefully it saved a few things. It has. Let's execute this step normally with username, and it works. And what does it log in the terminal? It logs something like this: username Namakiyat. Beautiful. Now let's make this a little more tricky. Let's add username array and username array here, and execute step. And it at least the thing that I've done is right. Something else is happening afterwards that's breaking it up. So that's why I said this is like a downstream issue. It would have existed even without all the logic that I have written. If someone puts a key that's a little more complicated, it's not able to parse it correctly. It's time for my breakfast. I'm just going to go grab breakfast and then get back to you guys. Abhi the fix that we have made, which mildly works, mildly doesn't work. Let me quickly PR it, not PR it, but at least push it. /fix -query -params, git status, git add this thing, git commit -m, added query string multi-parsing. Now I'm going to push this. Oh, there's a log that I added, so let me just remove that. Does git add this thing. Let me just amend the commits. The single commit has both things. And let me push this to my local fork. Goddammit. This will be a challenge. It's a different GitHub. So let me just set up this GitHub really quickly. Let me push this. Let me attach 𝗟𝗶H to my PR. And let me see, is 𝗟𝗶H able to catch the problem? And can it solve it for me, which would be beautiful. So the next step is PRing this, creating a local PR, attaching 𝗟𝗶H to my repo, and seeing, can it actually solve this issue if I ask it to? Let's get into that next. All right. Alrighty, folks, took a small break. I went to our college campus and gave the same problem statement, two issues actually, one this one and another issue, to a bunch of folks in the college campus. Surprise, surprise, not a lot of them were able to do it. I think in the end, 5, 6 were able to solve it. They took a while though, they took around 2 hours, and there were some obvious things that they missed. Good side tour, but let's get back on track. Let's try to again recap the solution once, and then we'll create a PR and see if 𝗟𝗶 is able to solve it or not. So if I go back to cursor, let's look at the diff that we have currently. The current diff looks something like this. I've added a new function called parameters to key value accumulate. While I was on campus, people actually thought of better names. So I'm probably going to replace this with parameters to key value QS, as in query string. That's probably a better name for it. And what does this function do? It has 3 if-else checks. Number 1, if it does exist and if it is a string, that means we need to convert the string to an array. If it does exist and it's not a string, that means it's an array, then we simply push. And then lastly, if it doesn't exist at all is when we set it to be a string. We saw that this does work, although in some specific use cases, the final output was not as expected. So we'll see if we can fix that specific part or not. We already have a different branch. I think I'm on the right remote. So let me just push this change. Actually, before I push this, a few things here. I cannot push this because this is a different GitHub. So I'll have to change the config file over here. Let me quickly do that.
A few moments later.
All right, after a bunch of debugging, I was able to push to my local fork. So if I go back to my local fork, I can see there is a new branch. I don't see it right now, but there it is. 𝗟𝗶H/fix query params. This is the branch that we have to PR and then finally make sure everything is on the up and up. From here is where we're going to log into 𝗟𝗶, and before I create my pull request, I'm going to install 𝗟𝗶 on the repository to make sure the changes that I've made are correct or not. So I'm going to log into 𝗟𝗶 now, give it access to my GitHub. Specifically, I can give it access just to this repository or to my entire GitHub. I am probably going to add all the repositories. So all my repositories 𝗟𝗶 now has access to. And every time I create a PR, it will vet my PR and let me know if I'm missing something. Let me quickly complete sign up. Let me go back to repositories, and now I can see NA10 as one of the repositories, where if I now create a pull request, so let me try to create a new PR, again, not to NA10, but to my local NA10 fork. I am not creating a pull request to the actual NA10 repository. I'm making a pull request to my local fork, so that 𝗟𝗶 kicks in and tells me if there is something that I've missed or not. So let me summarize the PR very close to how I would summarize the final PR. The PR fixes the HTTP request node and lets it send and it lets it send multiple query params with the same name. There is a GitHub issue. I'm not going to tag it, otherwise it will show up over there. Same with the linear issues, review, merge checklist. None of these would matter for the AI, but let me just mark all of them as done. And let's create a pull request, and let's hope 𝗟𝗶 kicks in and is able to tell us a few things about what might be good, what might be bad over here. There we go. 𝗟𝗶 gives the first comment now. It says currently processing new changes in this PR. It may take a few minutes. It's looking at the commits and the files that it's trying to process, which is the right file. Let's wait for a bit. Let's look at the comments that it generates. All right, 𝗟𝗶 was able to review, and now let's see what it commented. So there's a final single comment that 𝗟𝗶 has on my PR. It says adds a new accumulator function to aggregate query parameter key value pairs. That is correct. And updates both HTTP request v3 execution paths to use when the specified query is key pair. I don't know what this statement means. It all actually makes me think, okay, have I made the change in the wrong place? So I'm unsure if key pair was ever touched. But we'll see. And imports generic value for typing, which I did. That is correct in this specific file. So it's able to catch this and this correctly. I'm unsure what the thing in the middle is. And maybe there is something there. And I have missed something. I've made the change in the wrong place. We will see. It tells you the files that you've changed, which is this one right here. It summarizes the change of that file, which I think would be very close to the summary over here. Adds a parameter to key value accumulate function to aggregate the key value pairs, replaced prior logic usage for key pair query construction across both execution paths. This path again, I think I've made some change that I'm not sure of myself. I don't know what it means when it says both execution paths. So I should go back to the code and see what I've changed. And imports this generic value from n8n workflow to type accumulated values. Did this come from? Should probably come from some HTTP library. Actually, generic value, it does come from n8n workflow. I really thought this would come from the HTTP library, but yeah, that is fine. The good thing it does is this: it creates a graph of all the changes for you. It helps you visualize the thing better. In case you're confused by the final change that you've made, and I'm unsure if they can do this for a bigger PR, but for this specific PR, it's able to visualize everything well. Okay, you're supposed to build the query parameters, and you're using that. You're using this function to do it, and then eventually you're sending the HTTP request using the HTTP client. Coming to the main point, the poem. I'm kidding, but they do create a poem for you. I hop through keys, collect each pair, strings, and arrays. I sort with care. No drops, no dupes. I bundle tight. A tidy query for a speedy flight. Thump thump. The request now sings, accumulate, then spread its wings. Okay, it's pretty good. Not that it's needed, but it's a pretty good poem. Lastly, coming to the main point, which is, it has no follow-ups for me. Oh, it does. Okay. There you go. There are no actionable comments, but some nitpicks to keep in mind. So let's look at the nitpicks basically means small things that are good to change but not really needed. So let's look at the first one. It says harden duplicate accumulation to avoid type casting push. Use array. Use array.isArray type of guards and skip empty names. Yeah, this is actually a good suggestion. This I saw one of the students doing, and I wanted to do it in my code base as well. I didn't eventually. But I do agree this is probably not the best way to check things. Let's see what they have suggested. The way they have suggested things is if previous is undefined, so that basically means this check comes up front. I mean, they've written it a little more elaborately. I don't know if that's a good thing. They've elaborated a little bit more by first getting the value. What if they named it? There you go. Let me just copy paste what 𝗟𝗶 suggested here. I can actually copy paste the whole thing and then eventually look at what, or we can type it together. It's fine either way. If prev is equal to undefined, that means this is the first time it's coming, so it will be as simple as doing accumulator of cur.name equal to cur.value. Is that right? That looks right. Else, if the very first check that it has is this array.isArray check, which I like compared to what we had, which is this type of check over here for a string. What they've done is they've checked is this an array or not. This is a better check than this. It's hard for me to say why, but this is just looks a little ugly compared to an array.isArray check. And this I saw some other student do, and when I saw them do it, I wanted to make the same change on my side. And let's see what this guy does here. This can probably be generic value, but it's fine. And then there's an else, which basically means it is a string. So this check over here, I would assume. Let's confirm. Yeah, that works as well. String of previous, comma cur.value, and remove. So this is like a new change that I've made. It's a little different from how I was doing things before, and it's based on this nitpick that they had suggested. The only nitpick that I was worried about is this array.isArray, but I do like the whole thing that I've changed. So now my code is changed completely. Then comes another change. I'm very interested in this one. This has, this key pair that they keep talking about from time to time. Let's see, where is this being used? Over here. Okay, now I get it. When key pair, I was just very confused with the Web3 key pair. When they say key pair, they mean there are like two ways to, if you go to N8N, let me quickly show you. If you go to N8N, there are two ways you can specify a query string. One is like a JSON mode and the other is a query pair mode. That's what they meant when they said key pair. So if I open a HTTP request node, there are two ways I can, specify query parameters. This is called the key pair mode of sorts. This is called the JSON mode. We're only changing things in the first one. So let's see what they're doing here. Now they've suggested a few more things. Filter blank query names and auto set repeat when duplicates found. Prevent submitting an empty key in QoS if the user didn't set an array format and duplicates exist. It defaults to repeat to fulfill the same name. Okay, this is something interesting. Let's see. If send query and query parameters, so that code is over here, and if it is of type key pair, so they've just changed the whole thing to this. What they're saying is replace this with this. So let's try to see what this is. I'm sure there's a reason for what they, oh no, it's actually looks pretty similar. All it does is it just trims, just filters all the key value pairs where name is undefined, which is I guess fine. And what are they doing over here? If it has duplicates, it removes them. But what duplicates? So 1 second, let's see. Names equal to filter my p.name. Filtered is what? Has duplicates equal to this thing. Okay, there we go. This seems like an interesting thing, which I missed. What they're doing is, if the, first of all, this is QoS. I do like this change that they've suggested. What they're doing is they're specifying a new, so this request options is what we're trying to eventually populate, right? Yahan pe we're setting query strings to be something. This request option actually comes from this interface, which N8N only exposes. And somewhere here, there is a QoS stringify option? Seems like there isn't. So, oh, there is. Query string stringify options, and it has 3 values here: repeat, brackets, or indexes. And what it says is, okay, in case there are repetitions, then specify array format to be repeat. This is where I'll have to dig deeper into how query strings work and what exactly does query stringify options means. But I think this is a good change. If a user hasn't chosen an array format but has duplicates are present, prefer repeat. I just need to read what these 3 do, so let me quickly search that. Okay, I think I get it now. All right. So there are a few ways you can represent multiple query strings. It can be like this. api.xyz.com question mark foo equal to bar and foo equal to bar 2 and foo equal to bar 3. So that's one. The other way is foo equal to bar comma bar 2 comma bar 4. Then a third way is foo. I mean, what's the third way? Yeah, foo equal to bar 1 comma bar 2 comma bar 3, so on and so forth. There are like multiple ways you can represent if a single name points to multiple values. And what 𝗟𝗶H is suggesting over here is if the user doesn't set any array format and duplicates exist, default to repeat to fulfill same name parameter intent. Now this part I need to understand what it means over here. To fulfill same name parameter intent, it sort of makes sense for repeat. I mean, what I'm guessing is when you say repeat, or when you set the format to repeat, that basically means it's going to repeat all the query parameters one after the other, which is sort of what we want. I think it also defaulted to the same thing, because if I remember correctly, when we were testing this, it did work without me having to explicitly specify array format to be repeat. Either way, I think this is a good suggestion. So let's test out, does it do what it's supposed to do or not? And does it cover the weird use case that we were seeing as well? So the next thing is, after I have made the 𝗟𝗶H nitpick suggestions, ensuring that it actually works and it still does the thing that it's supposed to. Let's get into that next, testing the final workflow. All right, let's test the change that we have made. That includes the original change that we had made with a bunch of nits that 𝗟𝗶H suggested to us. Let's rebuild the project. Let's restart the project. And let's refresh one of the workflows that I had already. Let me also create a fresh HTTP dump. I was recording before this, but the mic was off, so I have to re-record this part. This is an old workflow that I had. In this workflow, there's an HTTP request trigger. I'm going to replace this, not trigger action. I'm going to replace this action with this URL over here. And it has two query parameters, username 𝗟𝗶H, username Raman. Let me execute this step, and once I do, notice the final request that comes. It looks something like this. It says $username equal to 𝗟𝗶H and username equal to Raman. So it looks like it's the right solution. We're specifying username twice, which is exactly what we wanted. But notice it doesn't get parsed correctly. It still says username Raman over here. Why do you think that is? Even though I've passed both of them, why is it able to only get one of them? And the answer is some languages or backends expect you to specify, if username is a key that's being repeated, it needs to have an array right after. If you are hitting a PHP backend, for example, if you're hitting a Node.js backend, a lot of times people don't care, and you can parse this as an array as well. But specifically for this website, I'm assuming this is written in PHP, so it expected there to be double brackets over here. Even though we sent the right request, it didn't work. And why do you think there aren't any brackets over here? Because if you remember, the array format that we had represented is repeat. If you represent, or if you mention the array format to be repeat, then the same string will be repeated again and again, but there will be no brackets that specify that. If you do want brackets to, be present over here, then you can replace array format with something else, most probably brackets. So if I replace array format with brackets, and if I rebuild the project, and restart the project, if I try to send a request again to the same HTTP endpoint, the request goes through, and if I open the new request that I just sent, notice it says username, bracket open, bracket close, encoded, equal to 𝗟𝗶H, and username, bracket open, bracket close, equal to Raman. And for a PHP backend, this is the right way to represent an array of query parameters, which is why it is able to parse it as two things. So the question really is, when do you specify brackets over here? When do you not specify brackets over here? And what kind of array format do you use over here? Do you use brackets? Do you use repeat, or do you use indexes? This remains an open question. Would probably depend on the PMs at init. I mean, ideally, in the very worst case, you can let the user himself specify if they want repeated keys to be represented in the form of brackets or repeated or indexes. That will be a little too nuanced for non-developers or UI builders. I think they don't want to get into such detail of query parameters. Hence, I'm unsure how to proceed from here. Maybe a good solution is, if there are brackets present over here, is when brackets should be present over here in the end. But if there are no brackets present in the keys that are present over here, then it should look something like this. No brackets should be present over here. So we should probably just leave it to the user. That's the final sort of change to make. By default, I think array format is set to brackets, so we can actually get rid of all the logic that we added over here to, check if there are more than one fields, and if there is a duplicate, then set array format to, we set it to repeat, but I think brackets by default makes more sense. So I'm going to leave it at that. This is the final change that we will commit. And I have already committed it because it's the second time I'm sort of recording this video. The mic was off the last time on this part. So if you look at the final diff that I have, it looks something like this. I have defined the function over here, which looks very similar to the function that I had defined with, a little bit of nits fixed over here. And lastly, I make sure if there are any keys that are, that is just empty strings, we remove them. And then finally, call reduce async with this new function that I have defined over here. That looks close to the solution, but again, this would depend on the PMs, and we should talk to the team to figure out if the user specifies brackets over here, should we parse them a different way? Will I PR this? No, there is someone else from 𝗟𝗶_𝘀𝘀 who has actually created a PR for this, so I'm not going to touch this. And he specifically has, solved for this use case. If there are brackets represented over here, the final thing that, appears over here is brackets. And if you look at the logic that he has written, he's, explicitly figured out whether or not a name has, brackets in it or not. And if it does, then, he's made some change based on that. That's probably the way to go. If there is brackets represented, then you should set the array format to be brackets. If not, then probably repeat. So I think you would need something like this, even though I do feel his, code change isn't complete at the moment. And he's currently working on the tests. And I think this is a well-tested solution, whatever he has made. Then probably, whatever janky logic he had to write for, figuring out if there are brackets or not, is probably, fine to have in the code base. That's all I had for this video. And if you're curious around, how real people were solving this issue in 𝗟𝗶_𝘀𝘀, I'm going to put a few videos right after this where we put this challenge out live in front of, a few people, and, how they were tackling this issue, how they were able to solve this issue, what kind of struggles they were facing. If you're facing similar issues, every developer sort of, it's a hard issue to fix with a bunch of, unanswered questions. So if you're facing similar issues, it's fine, and, it's part of the game. With that, we'll end it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye. तुम सही कह रहे हो कि चेंज यहाँ पे होगा. हाँ. यहाँ पे तुम कुछ उसको कॉम्प्लेक्स ऑब्जेक्ट बना दोगे स्ट्रिंग की जगह, बट एक बहुत ऑब्वियस चीज़ तुम मिस कर रहे हो. नागवानी भाई, क्या होगी वो? अरे ये जो फंक्शन है 4 जगह यूज़ हो रहा है. ओह, बॉडी पैरामीटर में भी यूज़ हो रहा है. बाकी जगह ब्रेक कर जाएगा. तो फिर कैसे फिक्स करेंगे? बाकी जगह का फंक्शन चेंज कर देंगे. कैसे करेंगे? मतलब 4 जगह यूज़ हो रहा होगा ना फंक्शन. बिल्कुल. तो बाकी जो 4 जगह जो एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा है वो, उसको भी मतलब उसी हिसाब से. अब वहाँ पे तो वो नॉर्मली एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा है जैसा चल रहा है अभी, उसको ये चेंज नहीं चाहिए. तो क्या करोगे? इसका एक बहुत सिंपल सोल्यूशन है भाई. इतना वो कॉम्प्लिकेट क्यों कर रहे हो? नया फंक्शन बना दो ना. सिर्फ उसके लिए नया फंक्शन बनाओ. That's a good question. What do you think? Probably don't need it, right? मतलब ये बाकी जगह यूज़ करो. बाकी जगह क्या कर सकते हैं इसको सीधा? इसको पूरा काट सकते हैं. एकदम से एल्स वाली कंडीशन लगा दे. इफ वाला हटा दे. एल्स वाला है ही नहीं ना, इफ अकेला है. इफ वाला हटा दे, एल्स वाला चलेगा. व्हाट वाज एल्स वाला? पूरा नहीं बने. हाँ, कोई नहीं, उठिए रहा ना. तो 2 लाइन से अब क्या होगा भाई? अब जल्दी से कर दो यार. अब इतने में अगर तुम यहाँ तक पहुँचे हो, अब क्या बचा? पहले तो इस फंक्शन को यूज़ करो जहाँ पे यूज़ करना है. ये वाला फंक्शन है, इसको कॉपी कर. वहाँ पे जो यूज़ हो रहा है क्वेरी पैरामीटर में, वहीं पे जा, कमांड F कर, क्वेरी पैरामीटर. हाँ, ये हाँ, यहाँ पे चेंज कर. तुम्हें रिड्यूस पता है क्या करता है नगमानी? हाँ, एक मतलब एक रिड्यूस टिक लेता है कॉलबैक फंक्शन, और एक इनिशियल लेता है. हाँ, मैंने पढ़ लिया. सेम वही है. इसको चेंज कर. मुझे थोड़ा रियलिटी चेक हो रहा है क्या? तो मुझे बहुत कोडिंग आती है क्योंकि मैंने 5 मिनट में कर लिया था कल. इट टुक मी 5 minutes टू सॉल्व. इट्स द सोर्स. अदर आई एम वेरी स्मार्ट और पीपल आर वेरी कॉन्शियस, और I don't know, people are very slow, maybe because they're all young people as well. But मुझे लगा था we'll be able to solve 2 issues today, but we will probably be only we'll probably only be able to solve one issue, which is the one that you guys are solving on YouTube as well. So that's some free Super 30 for you right there. Right, back to class. कहाँ जा रहे हो? He got into cal.com, so he gets a free pass.